Okay, get yourself ready for your morning practice. So sit yourself on a lift and come into a good seated position. Adjust in your position so that you feel as though you are sitting as evenly as you can. So evenness doesn't always come straight away. Just have a little wriggle about, just make sure that you feel that you're finding levelness underneath the seat bones. Hold onto your knees and then elevate your heart area up to the ceiling, drawing your shoulders down away from your ears. Just look down at the floor, look at something that isn't moving. Soften your jaw and your tongue and your throat. Elevating the heart area upwards, drawing the shoulders down, just observing your balance. Acknowledge the breath. Just observe your breath as it is naturally. Are you breathing evenly into both lungs and evenly out of both lungs? Just observing normal breath for you. And then aim to take slightly deeper inhalations, slightly deeper exhalations, but without overworking the breath. Just allowing the breath to be free, but just working with observation and action to slightly elongate the breath. Maintaining softness around the throat and the jaw and the tongue and the eyes and the forehead. Release your knees. Bring your hands into Namaste. Press the palms firmly together, and then with an exhalation allow your eyes to gently close. So continue to observe the breath. Listening to the sound of the breath as it enters and exits, observing whether the breath is even in both lungs. Observing which of the breaths are longer, the in-breath or the out-breath. And then draw your chin down to meet your chest. Lift your chest up to meet your chin. Jalandhara Bandha. Spend a moment to seek to generate a genuine, heartfelt sense of gratitude for something or someone or somewhere. Hold on to that feeling of abundance in the heart area. Bring the backs of the hands down toward your knees, connecting the tip of the thumb with the index finger, the palms facing upwards. Just a gesture of wisdom and intelligence and peacefulness that we can carry through into our practice. And then as you raise your head, allow your eyes to softly open. Hold onto your knees, lift up into your chest, elevate your heart area upwards, drawing your shoulders down away from your ears, taking deep inhalations, deep exhalations. And then gently turn to the left, turn to the right, sorry. Drawing your abdomen across, and your ribs and your shoulders. Driving the heart area upwards, using your out breath to intensify the turn. Just observing your body's response to the pose, and then come back to the center. Hold onto your knees, lift up into the chest. Observe your body's response to the previous pose. And then turn with an exhalation to the left. Acknowledging that when you inhale, you're bringing in the universal energy that surrounds us. So the prana, or in more scientific terms, the oxygen that we consume, is the same oxygen that the animal kingdom consumes. And the carbon dioxide that we exhale is the carbon dioxide that the plant world absorbs and returns oxygen in its wake. So the breath that we fill our lungs with connects us to everything that is alive on the planet, including the planet whose ecosystem connects us to everything. Just come back to the center, just lift up into the chest, drawing your shoulders down away from your ears. And then get yourself a belt and then stretch your legs out. Have the belt around your legs, but shuffle forward so that the backs of your thighs aren't kind of trapped onto the lift. And just have the feet about hip width apart to start off with, just to give you space. Hold onto the belt and roll consciously onto the front edge of the seat bones. Tighten in the kneecaps. Press in the shins into the floor, turning the fronts of the shins inwards, turning the fronts of the thighs inwards, lifting up into the heart area. So observe how elevation of the spine is almost entirely reliant on elevation of the legs. If you let go of the legs, it's really hard to not let go of the spine. In fact, I would even go as far to say near impossible. So just let your legs relax for a second and then notice how everything goes dull. And then activate your legs, extending from the hips into the heels, tightening the kneecaps, pressing the thigh muscles into the bone, being observant of the action on both legs, and then observe how you naturally begin to elevate the heart area, extending the spine out of the hips. Just breathe even deep inhalations and exhalations, just observing the spine's reliance on the legs. Rolling onto the front edge of the seat bones, feeling that we're not a sequence of or collection of limbs, we are a whole. So to activate the legs is to activate the spine, to activate the arms, to activate the head and the senses and the breath and the skin and the muscles and the flesh and the bones. If there's no problem with your back, just come forwards a little, but not too ambitiously, just an inch or two, and then reactivate. Observe how it feels different. Observe how it feels in your back. Observe that interconnectivity of the limbs. How activation of the upper body is reliant on activation of the lower body. Activation of the lower body becomes deeper through conscious activation of the upper body. If you can come forwards a little more without aggravating your back, then do. Just resetting the pose each time you change it. Or if you just stay in the first stage, then just observe how you can effectively become self-sufficient in your action. Keep coming forwards a little at a time. Maybe you can find the feet. Elevating the heart area upwards, just observing the interconnectivity of the limbs, the reliance on the legs, the reliance on the spine, the reliance on the arms and the neck and the head. And then gently come back to the center. Come into baddha konasana, so still on the lift. Get your belt and thread the belt underneath the feet. You can hold on to the big toes, but if you're sitting on a lift, often I find that makes you kind of drop in the chest, and we want to raise into the chest. So push the feet really consciously together. Push the heels together. Lengthen from the heels into the toes. And give yourself enough belt so that you can elevate the heart area upwards, gathering the shoulder blades together. Activate the legs to activate the spine. Lift up into the heart area, rolling onto the front edge of the seat bones. Push the heels consciously together to elevate into the spine, gathering the shoulder blades. And then gently release, just bring the legs out in front and then come onto all fours. Have your hands as wide apart as the mat, little fingers on the edge of the mat, stretching the thumbs towards each other. Turn the toes under, have the feet as wide apart as the mat. And then come up into dog down. Just observe where your Adho Mukha Svanasana is for you today. So just like in Dandasana, the action of the spine is almost entirely reliant on the action of the legs. So just go to the knees. Activate the kneecap, press in the fronts of the knees through to the backs of the knees. Lifting the fronts of the thighs up towards the tops of the legs. Turning the fronts of the thighs inwards, turning the fronts of the shins inwards so that the heels start to separate. Observing the legs on the left and the right, making them mirror each other, working the less enthusiastic leg into action that mirrors the more enthusiastic leg. From activation of the legs, feel that there is activation in the spine, in the arms. Keep your hands where they are, keep your feet where they are, swing your hips forwards, come up into dog, up. Keep the legs away from the floor, draw the tailbone in, broaden the collarbone. Push into the heels, lengthen the abdomen forward so you really broaden in the abdomen. And then come back up into dog down. Just breathing in through the nose and out through the nose, listening to the breath. Just observe how your body responds to dog down. Responds to having the head below the heart area. Don't stay too long if that doesn't feel good for you. And then step your feet forwards, come up into a standing position. And then have some blocks for your hands. Bring your feet as wide apart as your mat, turning the toes inwards, lift up into the chest. And then activating the legs, hinging at the hips, come forwards into half uttanasana. Go back to the legs, go back to your Dandasana action. It's the same pose, isn't it? Effectively. So can you activate your legs? Can you push them into an imaginary floor if you were sitting down? Push the thighs into that imaginary floor. And then project the chest away because the legs are working. If you can go down lower, then do. Just listening to the breath. Observing the action of the legs to deepen the extension into the spine, to activate the extension in the arms, keep the chin extending from the chest. So the torso is trying to pull the legs towards the front of the room, but the legs are trying to pull themselves towards the back of the room. Observe where your weight is in your heels. Can you hit the weight into the heels? Projecting the chin and the chest forwards. Keeping the legs straight, tightening the kneecaps. So Ruth, it looks like you're bending your knees a little, so tighten the kneecaps, press the kneecaps into the sockets, lift the backs of the thighs up towards the seat bones. Okay, and then bring your hands into your hips and then come up into a standing position, just come into Tadasana. Just breathe in through the nose and out through the nose, observing how your breath has changed. Just listening to the breath. Activate your legs as though you're in Dandasana. As if you were laying on the floor, you were pushing your legs into the floor. So push the fronts of the legs through to the backs of the knees, backs of the legs. Turning the fronts of the thighs inwards. And the more active the legs, the more you can engage with the spine. Elevating it upwards to find length and openness in the chest. Turn the palms all the way out. Squeeze in the shoulder blades towards each other. Breathing even deep inhalations and exhalations. Elevating up into the heart area. And then release, just release your Tadasana and observe how the body becomes a little duller, but also how maybe you kind of feel like you lose a little bit of height. Maybe you lose focus in the feet. So we're going to go into Uttanasana, but this time we're going to do Uttanasana with the feet together. So have a couple of blocks. So you'll definitely need blocks for this if your feet are together. So we do Uttanasana at the beginning with the feet apart. That gives you space in your hips. Doing it with the feet together is a little bit more tricky. So I'll go back to normal and turn this sideways so you can see what I'm doing with my legs. So have the inner edge of the feet together. If you know that this is going to be too strong in your back to go down there, then you can have a chair. And because my back has been slightly kind of dodgy of late, I'm going to start with the chair, and then I know that that my back is going to be fine, and then I'll just see where my back is capable of going. So in Tadasana, just reactivate it, tightening the legs, pushing the legs, the fronts of the legs into the backs of the legs, tucking the tailbone in, lifting up into the heart area. Raise your arms up, extend your arms up to the ceiling. But again, your arms will only activate if your legs are activated. So work into the legs. Work the fronts of the legs into the backs of the legs. Draw your weight into the heels. Tighten the kneecaps, activate the thighs. Feel that the legs are evenly activated, and then draw more of that activation up into the heart area. And then hinge at the hips, stretching forward, and then reach down and find the top of the chair or the blocks. So I'm going to start here. So in Uttanasana, consciously turn the tops of the thighs inwards, from the almost from the top of the thigh towards the hip. Turn those inwards, even if the heels start to separate. And then elevate the tailbone up towards the ceiling. Project the chin and the chest forwards. Maybe you can hold onto the chair legs if you're using the chair, just sliding yourself down. Maybe find the blocks, hit the shins back so that your weight goes into your heels, projecting the chin and the chest forwards, reliant on the legs to extend into the spine. If you can go down lower, then use the blocks. Just observing how maybe the restriction in the hips is more than you perhaps counted on. Because the feet are together. But because the feet are together, you have to rely on the turn of the legs to give you that space in the hips. So turn the tops of the legs from the outer thigh to the inner groin. Extending the chin and the chest forwards. If you can reach the floor, then find the floor. Elevating the heart area upwards, keeping the head lifted. Keeping the legs straight. Straight legs is the real challenge. If you can, bring your fingers in line, your fingernails in line with your toenails. And then keep lifting the chest, lifting the legs, and try and bring the heels of the hands down onto the floor. That's a little bit far for me, for my back today. So I'm going to come up and find my comfort zone. Projecting the chin and the chest forwards. If there's a reason why you shouldn't bring your head lower than your heart, then just find the level of the blocks that gives you that levelness. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. And then bring your hands into your hips and then come up into a standing position. Just come back into Tadasana. Lifting up into the chest, elevating the heart area upwards, hitting the legs back. Just feel how you have charged up the physical body. Consciously activate the hands, spreading the fingers, spreading the palms. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. And then just gently release. Come down onto the mat and then come down into baddha konasana. So pulling the feet towards you, having the soles of the feet pressing firmly together and then lengthening the knees away from each other, lengthening the inner knees around to the outer knees. Just finding the floor. Pushing the feet consciously together so that you can activate your legs. So this pose is supta baddha konasana. It could be just a completely passive pose, but that's good for kind of relaxation. But we're using this as a standing pose effectively. Press the feet consciously together so that you really activate the shins. Lengthening the inner shin into the inner knee and then lengthening the inner knee around to the outer knee, activating the knee into the hips along the thighs. Feel that the sacrum spine compress deeply into the floor and then lengthen the tailbone away from the sacrum. Broaden the abdomen from the belly button all the way into the abdominal wall. With activated legs, maybe you find that you can lengthen the spine a little more effectively. Stretch your arms to the ceiling, spreading the fingers and then interlock. The fingers, turn the palms all the way out and then lengthen your arms along the floor. If there's stiffness in your shoulders, then you can use blocks underneath your hands, or a folded blanket underneath your hand. You can use blocks underneath the thighs if the thighs feel stiff or aggravated by supta baddha konasana. But if you activate your feet really consciously, your hips probably feel a little more secure than they do when you just flop into the floor. But use whatever you need. So go back to the feet, press the outer edge of the feet together, press the heels together, lengthen from the heels into the toes. Lengthen the inner legs from the inner groin and the inner ankle into the inner knee, and then lengthen the inner knee around to the outer knee. Keeping compactness in the hips. Observing how you can lengthen in the armpits the more you activate your legs. Lengthen from the hips along the spine and up into the armpit region. From the armpits into the elbows, squeezing them together, from the elbows into the heels of the hands, spread in the palms. And then keeping the legs active. Bring the arms back up to the ceiling, and then swap the interlock of the fingers, turn the palms all the way out. And then again, really actively lengthen the arms away from the body bit. And that has to come from the feet. So connect the feet to the hips, to the armpits, to the hands. So just like we are interconnected, our lives are entirely reliant on things that surround us. We are in many ways the same as the animal world, and we rely heavily on the plant world to sustain our existence, just as we are a cog in the interconnectivity of life. Then the feet are the source of the action of the legs. The legs are the source of action of the spine. The spine is the source of action of the arms. The palms are the source of action of the feet. So the more you activate the palms, the more you can activate the feet. The more you can activate the feet, the more you can turn the tailbone in, the more you can protect the hips. Just release your arms, just rest your hands on your lower ribs, and then just let yourself relax into the pose of supta baddha konasana. And observe how that feels different. Maybe it feels a little stronger on the hips than you expected it to. So put blocks underneath your thighs. Just observe your energy, observing the energy that you have evoked through the interconnected action of the feet and the hands and everything between. Okay, gently draw your knees together. Your knees have been apart for quite a while, so it will probably feel like there's a lot of openness there. So have the knees together, the feet apart, and just observe your energy for a moment or two. And then draw your knees in towards your chest. Just have a little rock from side to side, from top to bottom, just a gentle massage on the lower back. And then gently rock yourself up into the seated position, and then come back into cross legs. Come into cross legs, just observing maybe how your cross legs feels different. Just have a little rock from front to back, just observing how perhaps there's more openness in your hips. Hold onto your knees and lift up into the chest. So just rocking from front to the back. You can even do the seated cat and cow, where you roll onto the back. So Ruth, that's what you've been doing, isn't it? So you roll onto the back, round in your back, and then roll onto the front edge of the seat bones, and then lift the heart area upwards. So just do that action a couple of times, just to kind of really activate the spine. Acknowledging that the cat pose might feel quite nice on the back, but it lacks extension. And when you roll onto the front edge of the seat bones for the seated cow pose, you suddenly find more dynamism in the extension. So from there, I want you to bring your legs wide for upavistha konasana. Have some blocks where you can reach them. So have the legs really wide apart. Can you roll onto the front edge of the seat bones, or do you? So can you do effectively the seated cow rather than the seated cat? If you struggle to come away from the cat, then sit on a folded blanket. Sit yourself so that you can roll more consciously onto the front edge of the seat bones. And then with the blocks in front of you, just press the fingertips into the floor and then extend into the chest. Activate the legs in Tadasana. So turn the tops of the thighs inwards, turn the inner knees down to the floor, activating the kneecaps, turning the inner shin, the fronts of the shins from the big little toe side to the big toe side, and lift up into the chest. Just feel how extension into the spine is wholly reliant on that extension into the legs, pushing from the hips into the heels, pressing the legs down into the floor like you were doing Dandasana. Lift up into the chest. If you've got back problems, you might just want to stay at this stage, or just walk your hands on the blocks forward. Spread the palms, press the palms into the blocks, spread the fingers, lift up into the chest. So just a little bit at a time. Coming forwards, lifting the heart area upwards. Just coming forwards a little bit at a time. If this is strong for your back, then just go back to the first stage. Activate the legs, to activate the spine, to activate the arms. Acknowledging the interconnectivity of the limbs. And then come back. Just have the hands behind the hips or to the sides of the hips. Fingers pointing forwards, lifting up into the heart area. Just again, when you come up, maybe your legs released a little. So can you extend consciously from the hip into the heel, turning the fronts of the thighs inwards, tightening the kneecaps, turning the inner knees down to the floor. Lift up into the heart area. And then get a block, hold the block like you want to tear it apart, and then raise your arms over your head. Again, just going back to that reliance on firm action from the legs into the spine, into the arms. pulling on the belt like you want to tear it apart. On the block even, like you want to tear it apart. And then gently release, just observing the energy that you have generated in the heart area and the chest. And then get hold of the backs of the knees and then bring the feet back into baddha konasana. Again, if you kind of roll into that seated cat pose, sit on a folded blanket or on some blocks so that you've got a little more lift in the spine, holding onto the big toes if you can, or you can always go back to the belt, holding around the belt, or you can even hold onto the shins. I quite like holding onto the shins. It gives me much more space. So just holding onto the feet, onto the big toes, like you're doing padangusthasana. Press the feet together and into the floor like you want to stand up, so that the legs become engaged. And then from that leg engagement, can you engage more deeply up into the heart area? Feeling the warmth of energy radiating from the pelvis and up into the heart area, drawing the shoulders down away from the ears. And then gently release, and then just bring the legs into swastikasana, just into basic cross legs. And hold onto your knees, lift up into the heart area, elevating the heart area up to the ceiling, drawing your shoulders down away from your ears. Take a really deep inhalation, and then turn to the right side. Digging the back hand into the floor, rolling onto the front edge of the seat bones, like you're in the seated cow pose. Draw your abdomen from the left to the right, drawing your belly button to point directly at that right knee and beyond it. Feeling how the legs don't become passive, they extend. So push the heels away from the shins, pull the toes toward your knees, activate the shins to activate the thighs, and then you can activate into the spine. And then come back to the center. Just swap the way that you are crossing your legs, so you do the unnatural leg crossing. So maybe we're used to cross legs being quite passive, but can you lengthen from the shin into the knee and from the knee into the heel, and then flex the toes so that you really activate the legs. So if you activate the shins, you can activate the thighs, you can roll onto the front edge of the seat bones, bringing energy and lift up into the chest. Sit on something if you struggle to do that. Lift up into the chest and then turn to the left. So by sit on something, I mean like a folded blanket or a block. Draw the abdomen across. Keep the legs really deeply engaged. Keep the shins engaged, keep the thighs engaged. Draw your abdominal region across. and then gently come back to the centre. And then come down onto your back. So come down onto your back, holding the edges of the mat really firmly so that you can roll from the tailbone into the hips, but keeping the tailbone down at the same time. So really activating the arms, holding the sides of the mat like you want to tear the mat apart. Turning the crease of the elbows to face the ceiling and out to the sides of the room. And then extend into the legs. Extend from the hips into the heels, turning the legs like you're in that dandasana. So it's that same action that we return to, but gravity is different. So can you activate the legs like you activated them at the beginning of the session when we stretched our legs out with the belt around the legs? Pressing the legs into the floor. So imagine that your legs are pressed into the floor and you're pressing the fronts of the thighs through to the backs of the thighs. Lengthening from the hips into the heels and letting that action of the legs feed into the spine. And then gently release the feet. So bend your knees, bring your feet back down onto the floor. Get a blanket for underneath your head. And then just come up onto your elbows. Make sure you're in a really good straight line right down the centre of the mat. And then guide yourself down onto the floor. Just take your glasses off and then allow yourself to completely release into the mat. Just let the body become heavy on the ground. Allowing the body to rest into the ground, feeling that the energy of the body radiates out from the bones and into the muscles. From the bones into the muscles and into the organs. bones and into the muscles and into the organs and into the flesh and the skin. Using your in-breath and your out-breath to distribute that feeling of energetic lightness evenly down into the toes, into the fingers and up into the top of the head. And then when you're ready to disturb yourself, just gently wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers, just coming back into this pose of Shavasana. And then draw your knees in towards your chest, just have a little rock from top to bottom, from side to side, just a gentle massage on the spine. And then gently roll over onto your right side. And then straighten out the top leg, come back up into a seated position. Just coming back into cross legs with your hands in Namaste, just a final spinal lift. Draw your breath in through your nose and down into the abdomen. Be conscious of the energy that you have released through your practice this morning, that good, positive, healthy flow of clean energy that the extensions, the forward bends and the twists and the inversions bring to the body and to the mind. And then draw your chin down to meet your chest. Just spend a moment to acknowledge the positive energy you have created inside. And then send some of that positive energy out into the world. And then release the backs of your hands down towards your knees, palms facing upwards. Connecting the tip of the index finger with the tip of the thumb. And then as you raise your head, allow your eyes to softly open and the focus to softly come back. Thank you very much. So hopefully you feel like you have really lifted your energy, given your body and your mind some energy and some balance. So thank you very much for joining me.